So today we're making roasted tomato salsa. I roasted the tomatoes in the oven at 425 for 45 minutes. Then I put them under the broiler just until they got that roasted, toasted skin. Next, I'm going to put in the peppers and onions. I have 3 different kinds of peppers and 2 different kinds of onions. And we'll go ahead and bake for 425. For another 40 minutes. And then we'll broil those too. Now I am following a recipe and they want me to dice these peppers. So we have to give them time to cool. So in the meantime, we can start processing some of these tomatoes per the recipe. When you roast tomatoes, now I just know because my tomatoes tend to have a lot of liquid in them, and I've already found that out. The recipe says to include all the juices. I am going to limit the amount of juice so I don't have a runny salsa. So I am going to scoop some of these tomatoes into the blender with the skin, the seeds, and everything. They're fire roasted, so the toasted skin is what's going to add a little more flavor. Luckily, my tomatoes don't have a lot of seeds. The recipe recommends heirloom and Romas, and both of those are lower on the seed count. I'm actually tripling this recipe, so I have quite a bit. I'm doing 15 pounds of tomatoes, so everything is times 3. I believe they want you to add the garlic to the blender. And this recipe said half the diced onions in the blender and half will be whole in the salsa. But I roasted most of the onion, and that's not according to the recipe, but that's just according to my taste. Now, if you ever have a canning recipe, I can only recommend you follow it exactly. Any changes I make are on me. You know, and my own risk and my own level of safety. For your family, best to follow the recipe as it's written. Here we go. Now the recipe says blend till smooth. So this is not going to be a very chunky salsa, at least the tomato part won't be. But I think you can blend it as much as you like. I blended it just that little bit, so it is smooth, but not uniformly smooth. Okay, we've got all our tomatoes blended and our peppers and onions diced. I'm going to add this all to the pot with the tomatoes. Now we're going to add the rest of the spices. I've tripled this recipe, so this looks quite a lot. 3 cups apple cider vinegar. And by the way, the recipe is in the description. So if this interesting recipe catches your fancy, you can go ahead and make it yourself. Then the cumin, I have 6 teaspoons of ground cumin, 4.5 teaspoons of chili powder, the recipe calls for 7.5 teaspoons of espresso powder, which is optional. So coffee. Now, I don't have espresso powder, but I do have some dehydrated coffee, freeze-dried coffee. I'm not sure how much I'm going to like it, and I don't want to ruin the whole batch. So I'm putting in 2 tablespoons of freeze-dried dark coffee, which equals 6 teaspoons instead of the 7.5 of espresso. So you can always flavor it more later on down the road if you think it needs it. 1.5 teaspoons of ground black pepper, 9 teaspoons of kosher salt, and wouldn't you know it, I've measured it out and it was the exact amount that was left in my container. 1.5 cups of fresh cilantro. Now, I actually don't have any more fresh cilantro. Mine is all gone to seed. But I have dried cilantro, and I very rarely use it. But I've also read that fresh herbs like cilantro and basil don't do that well in canning. So I am going to do dried. I have 1/4 cup of dried. However, when you open up the salsa to serve it, you can add fresh cilantro then. So I'm going to stir this all together, and I'm going to bring it to a boil and then simmer for 10 minutes. And in the meantime, I need to get the canner ready and get all my jars clean and ready for canning. This is going to take a while to get to a boil, so. I also want to say something about the heat and the peppers. For some reason, I didn't have hot peppers this year. I had all sweet peppers, but I have a wide variety of peppers. I've also had the occasion of making salsa with hot pepper, and it just turned out way hotter than you guessed. So always use less than you think. The recipe says use the same amount of peppers no matter which, whether it's bell pepper, red pepper, hot pepper, just as long as that amount. So I have the exact amount of pepper, just not hot. And again, when I open this up, if I want to serve a hot salsa, I can add hot sauce to it then. So this is going to be a mild salsa. So I'm going to go ahead and let this cook on low to medium until it comes to a boil. Then simmer 10 minutes, and then we'll be ready to put it in jars. I cannot even begin to tell you how good this salsa is. The coffee adds this rich, deep, sultry, well-rounded flavor that complements the fire-roasted tomatoes, peppers, and onions. It is so unbelievably good. This is my go-to salsa. And don't be afraid of the coffee. I used 2 tablespoons, which would be 6 teaspoons of regular freeze-dried coffee, dark roast. The recipe called for 7.5 teaspoons of espresso. So that might be a little more coffee than you'd like. So I would experiment with what works for you, but please don't be afraid of the coffee. It is so good. I've sterilized my jars. I'm getting ready to can them. I'll have 2 batches in the canner. And I won't can all of it. I'm going to keep some to have for dinner. Well, I hope you try this recipe, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Take care.